Hey yo, what's good guys? Another video here. Today we got something I've been intending to react to for a while, but I never actually got to it. So I literally had to go double check I didn't react to this. Turns out I didn't. So we're about to sit back, watch this video, and just see where it goes. This should be interesting.
Grew up in Denmark, and these are countries where the government spends taxes and spends approximately twice the level of the United States. And while I am very sympathetic to many of your spending proposals, especially on the things you mentioned on early childhood and single payer and the like, I also know that these are countries that heavily tax everybody, not just the rich people. Middle classes, they have consumption taxes on everything of 20%. So while I'm very sympathetic to what you say, my sense is still that you would like to spend as a Scandinavian, but not tax as one. Is that correct?
We have, the answer is, and you raised some very good points.
Comparing the US with Europe and countries...
Bro, time out. Bro went and said, hey, time out. So you wanna go ahead and spend like that, but you don't want to take down money. How's that work? Hey yo, dude, I want to hear his response to that. That would be very interesting.
In Europe would be naive, oversimplistic, and offend a bunch of people. Land masses are complex. But I'm going to go ahead and compare them anyways, because some of the comparisons between Europe and the US remain way too superficial.
Hey, that is very true. This is actually a very good map of kind of like the different kind of subcultures the US has. That's very true.
My lips. No new taxes.
It's not uncommon to obsess over the usual suspects for why the US is less equal than Europe and also has less good quality, affordable social programs. The analysis is simple. The US has more billionaires and taxes them less. Europe has less billionaires but taxes them more. Need a larger tax base to fund popular social programs and also less inequality? Just raise the taxes on the rich, like the Europeans do. Now, although the tax rates for rich people explain some part of the difference, it doesn't explain enough. Europeans can afford good social programs because a lot of Europeans pay a lot for them, mainly through indirect taxes. And Europeans are also more equal before taxes even factored in because a lot of the social programs they pay more for also reduce pre-tax inequality. But the US has, so far, been unable to adopt the same. Why? Well, in part because taxing the wealthiest of society is easier to advertise and justify than taxing everybody a lot more. In Europe, most people don't really need to be convinced about paying for their welfare states because it works sufficiently for most of them. But in the US, there's an intimate struggle with deciding whether pre-distribution will be a state, local, or federal solution. Part of the reason is that in the US, the federal government gets the most media attention, while state and local governments can avoid scrutiny. This means that minimum wage hikes in the US are practically always seen as a responsibility for the federal government, which has to delicately balance different costs of living, like laborers living in New York City and miners living in West Virginia. In Europe, though, a country like France or Denmark can opt for different geographically sensitive policy while also being held more directly into account because the assignment of responsibility.
I feel like I'm not pausing this a lot, but like, I don't really got much to say, dude. Speaking a lot of true shit. Like, I just don't have much to throw on top of this, so I'm sorry if I'm not really pausing and giving a crazy, insightful reaction on this, because I can't really, all I can say is he's kind of right.
Is clearer to its citizens.
There's this definition of a wicked problem, which is circulating around in the literature, which suggests that a wicked problem is wicked if it has so many dimensions to it that you can't go at one angle to the problem and try to fix it. And I think school finance is like that. So school districts get money from their local communities in the form of property taxes. They'll also get money from the state, and the state might give them money through multiple formulas. And then a portion, a much smaller portion, about 9 or 10%, comes from the federal government. So even if you try to solve the problem at, say, the state level, there are these other funding sources that come with their own restrictions, which ultimately affect how the money gets used in schools.
In Connecticut, a U.S. state, a school in Bridgeport will be poorer by virtue of being surrounded by poor properties, while a school in Greenwich will be richer because it is surrounded by richer properties. This is because local taxes are largely funded by property values in the area. However, this concept fails to explain everything. Educational disparities also exist across Europe and within its countries. The US is not unique for having a system that predisposes poor children to poorer resources. Education systems are complex. Finland is not the same as Sweden, and resources invested in education and the quality that follows does not seem like a linear relationship. The US's unique situation is that its quality does not match the amount that the US actually spends on it. One of the problems with answering why resources don't match the quality you would expect in the US is because the decentralized nature of school districts makes it pretty difficult to actually identify what spending works and what doesn't. Overall, there are some indications that, compared with Europe, the amount of staffing, the associated health and retirement benefits, alongside transportation, all add up to more cost for the American education system. But the differences don't end there.
In the 1990s,
See, before we get into what he's about to say, I always find it interesting how our system costs a lot of the time. Like, he's kind of starting to explain how the education system, which, even though I went through school, I don't know all the ins and outs of how all that works and everything. But from what he's saying, I'd have to go and do my own research and confirm or deny this, that we spend more money on our education system for a worse system. How does that even make sense? Like, what the... Like, how? That makes no sense. Again, I might have misunderstood him, or he might be wrong. Again, I haven't done my own research on this, so I'm not going to confirm or deny. I just watch... When I watch these videos, I assume everything that they say is true, and then after I go and, you know, research it and look into some of this stuff and be like, is that true? Is that not true? But when I'm just watching the video, I'm just going to assume that everything he's saying is right.
as the crime rate was plummeting, as American life was getting safer and safer, Americans freaked out and thought that if they take their eyes off their children, the children will be abducted. Now, this goes back, the fear was stoked by cable TV in the 1980s. There were a few high-profile abductions. But it's not until the 1990s that we really start locking kids up and saying, you cannot be outside until you're 14 or 15.
It's true.
We took this essential period of childhood from about 8 to 12, when kids throughout history have practiced independence, have gotten into adventures, have made rafts and floated down the Mississippi River. We took that period and said, you don't get to practice independence until it's too late, until that period is over.
That is extremely true. Nah, that's pure facts. That is pure facts. That's one thing I'm very glad and kind of wonder if maybe that's why I tend to not be as, I don't know, soft or emotional as a lot of people in my generation, because my parents are older. They raised me, you know, I guess different than a lot of people in my generation were raised. So that's not necessarily saying every single person in my generation is like a major, like, extra soft, sensitive person, but I think you guys get what I'm trying to say. I can't really think of the exact wording of what I'm trying to say, but the coddling is definitely something I've seen a lot, not in my personal life, but people I've known and seen, like, definitely I've seen that.
Kids in the US are raised differently than kids in Europe. Some blame the planning that produced more isolated American families, some the over-paranoia towards kidnapping in the 1980s, and others point to an increasingly competitive environment where parents try to give their children an edge over the others by helicoptering them. It's really not that far a stretch to say that many European children could be considered to have more freedom at an earlier age. American children are less likely to be able to walk to school alone compared with European children, which you can of course connect to overall crime rates.
But I think that's also, it depends on the area too. Like, there are definitely areas where there's a lot of freedom and, you know, kids are still out running around and, you know, all that. So that's not necessarily, you know, completely true nationwide, but there are definitely a lot of places where that's more true than not true, and there's a lot of places where that's less true than it is true.
Authoritative school policy is still much more accepted across the US than it is in Europe.
So, the real key to the distinctiveness of America is the structure of our government. One part of it, of course, is the independence of the judiciary. But there's a lot more. There are very few countries in the world, for example, that have a bicameral legislature. Oh, England has a House of Lords for the time being, but the House of Lords has no substantial power. They can just make the Commons pass a bill a second time. France has a Senate, it's honorific. Italy has a Senate, it's honorific. Very few countries have two separate bodies in the legislature equally powerful.
The problem with that, from what I've seen today, is, at least in my personal opinion, it almost looks like it don't matter what side you support, because they're gonna pretend to, get us. If you support this side and you support this side, you need to fight and be angry at each other. While both sides you support are, guess what? Secretly, I low-key feel like they're teaming up to just make sure they all make money. Because at the end of the day, that's all that people out here really give a shit about is money. And if I can figure out that it doesn't take a genius to realize if they work together behind the scenes, everybody makes more money, it doesn't take a genius to realize that it's more than likely happening. That's just my personal opinion with zero proof, other than just I look at the crap I see on the news and really think it's just some like big gimmick extraction BS from whatever's really going on. But that's, hey, call this conspiracy theory if you'd like.
That's a lot of trouble, as you gentlemen doubtless know, to get the same language through two different bodies elected in a different fashion. Very few countries in the world have a separately elected chief executive. Sometimes I go to Europe to talk about separation of powers. And when I get there, I find that all I'm talking about is independence of the judiciary. Because the Europeans don't even try to divide the two political powers, the two political branches, the legislature and the chief executive. In all of the parliamentary countries, the chief executive is the creature of the legislature. There's never any disagreement between them and the prime minister, as there is sometimes between you and the president. When there's a disagreement, they just kick him out. They have a no confidence vote, a new election, and they get a prime minister who agrees with the legislature. And, the Europeans...
The difference is simple. European countries are mainly nations, not federations. A European state, if it existed, could never be the same as the US. Written in their constitution, US states are modeled after the federal government, and state governments, which mirror the one above, usually have their own Chamber of Representatives, a Senate, and also have an executive mirrored after their president. In Europe, if there was any state that was above the countries that made it up, it would have to be modeled from those very different countries beneath it, rather than serving as a model for the countries below it. This is an important difference because it means that any kind of European government would have to balance parliamentary systems with presidential republics, federal states with unitary ones, and they'll be expected to create a system that hopefully pleases each one sufficiently. All in all, although the differences between the two are practically endless and some are near impossible to actually describe, it's still a worthwhile effort to try and figure a few out and also discuss them. In some way, Europe has more breathing room to understand what it wants to be.
Wait, time out. Why did they put peanut butter and jelly as a difference? What? Explain that. Throwing spaghetti at the wall. Explain what? I don't understand that. Time out. Like, this is a good video, and I wish I could have said more during it, because honestly, a lot of it, like, I didn't have much to say because I was just sitting here and just kind of taking it in and kind of understanding what he's saying. And I agree with a lot of what he said, if pretty much all of it, to be honest with you.
Which is no easy task, because whatever you think Europe is, it can...
How are you? Oh yeah, that's kind of like a greeting here versus you guys take, like, how are you start. Okay, that one I get. That one I've been told about before. I remember that one.
Still look across the Atlantic and realize...
Tipping, yeah, tipping's an insult there.
What it definitely is not.
Kids getting shot in school, that's probably true. Amount of patriotism, definitely true. High school generally, explain that one. Explain that one to me. Paying for water. Wait, you guys don't pay for water? That's a thing? What? College life, dorms? Explain that one too. Like, how is your college different than our college? I feel like this is just a list of videos I should watch. Police? Like, some of these could make really good reaction videos. Portion sizes, that's true. Sales tax, talking to strangers, Pledge of Allegiance, homelessness, political. Yeah, nah, the whole PC BS. That's kind of what I was alluding to with my generation, where everybody, like, it's one thing to feel a certain way. It's another thing to, like, literally throw an entire hissy fit because somebody sees things differently than you do. Flag obsession. I don't know if it's like we're really obsessed with the flag. Like, I'm not obsessed with a flag. I've lived here my entire life. Like, I'm used to seeing the flags around and stuff, but like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me though. Border control, skyscrapers. Wait, what's skyscrapers? You guys don't. What do you mean skyscrapers? Affordable cheese? Can you guys please, like, just explain some of these to me? What? That's great. Hey, this was a really good video though. Like, I'd love to watch more of this. Give me a fat ass like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, click all. Let me know what to watch next. And any of your opinions. Hey, speak your piece. You guys are always free to say whatever you want in this channel. Bye.
With